організацій, колеги, які дивляться нашу трансляцію. Сьогодні ми з вами будемо розмовляти про те, хто потрібен в новій Вищій кваліфікаційній комісії суддів України, і будемо проводити такий діалог доброчесності. Сьогодні з нами на зустрічі і будуть брати участь в цьому діалозі пан Євген Мезенцев, член конкурсної комісії.
Dear friends, we're so happy to see you here. We have Yevhen Mezentsev, a judge of the 6th Administrative Court of Appeal, Robert Bruckhausen, a selection commission member, a lawyer, and a former special prosecutor from the Netherlands. And also from civil society, we have today Halina Chizik, an expert of the Corruption Prevention Center and a member of the Public Integrity Council. Since 2016 and 2020, Mikhail Zhirakov is the chairman of the board of the Jure organization, also the member of the Public Integrity Council from 2016 till 2020. Today, we're going to be talking about the following issue. First of all, we're going to be talking about the picture of the portrait of the potential candidate, and we're going to be talking about who shall submit their applications for the selection. What's the standards of proofs, and what's the agenda for the reasonable doubt in this situation? We're going to be listening to questions from our civil society. They might have some questions to the selection commission members as well. We're going to be talking about the potential candidates that will be joining us and will participate in this competition. Before we go to the agenda items, I would like to first of all encourage our participants of this dialogue to make brief introductions and tell a bit about themselves. Please share some comments about what you think about integrity and how it should work as a criterion under the current legislation, as well as the Selection Commission's methodology. If you don't mind, we're going to start with Yevhen Mezentsev. Please, Yevhen, you have the floor. Thank you very much. Actually, God bless. At the point when we had an opportunity to actually figure out all the selection procedures, the law had already did the setting. So the law had provided many items regarding impartiality, diligence, ethics, integrity, reputation, immaculate behavior, and actually the legitimacy of the proceeds and the financial transparency. Once the individual complies with all these requirements, and of course, this person is encouraged to actually apply. So now we have all the prerequisites and all the requirements. I'm sure we have a broad circle to apply all these aspects to make sure we do proper evaluation. How this selection process is different from How is it different from the Supreme Court or the Anti-Corruption Court? The difference is that right now we are not expecting any tests or any score points or any kind of structure that will be verifying the winners and those who will lose. But no, we are going in a different way. We start with two major criteria. This is professional proficiency or professional competence and integrity, two parts. So before our today's meeting, I monitored the information on Facebook, and I actually wanted to share some of the positive insights regarding the article that was recently published by Mikhailo. I even liked it. I couldn't share any comments about this though, but I really loved how you objectively presented all this information regarding the judicial reform. You were writing about who is supposed to be a judge in the upcoming time. And actually, one of the issues that had been suggested by the commission members from the Mikhailo's subscribers pool was if the commissioners feel positive and if they have the positive vision for the future developments of this situation given this competition process. Beyond any kind of reasonable doubt, we do feel positive emotion. We are positively set up. We have reliable understanding of each other. We have we've gotten acquainted, and at least for now, we understand who we are and what kind of assessment there is regarding integrity and what kind of requirements we have to follow. Those opinions may be different from our commissioners, but they are always balanced and they are all produced as a consensus, as a result of the discussion. It's not always the case that we unanimously vote in favor of all the decisions, but we always have very detailed discussions and then we make decisions based on the participatory approach. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks very much, Johan, for this intervention. I'm going to give the floor to Robert right now. Please, Robert.
Yes, Robert Broekhuizen from the Netherlands, former prosecutor. Fiat already explained who I am. What I would like to discuss with you is what is integrity. I think that integrity is a very difficult subject to discuss, because if you would ask people what they think is good behavior or not good behavior, it would differ between individuals, but especially also between nationals. We had quite some discussions in the Commission, what is good and bad. And what is funny is that at some issues I look differently than Yevgen, even though he is a judge. And earlier in my career, I was the boss of a very large law firm in the Netherlands. And I would be asked time after time whether certain behavior was acceptable or it was not acceptable. And at that time, I was quite young, not even 40. I would have a very different view on what was acceptable behavior to what I find acceptable now. And that has a few reasons. For instance, the time is different, which means that integrity develops over time, and the ideas of integrity develop over time. But also, it's the development of myself, because I've been busy with thinking about integrity so many years that you also develop your own views. Integrity and independency. If you're a judge, you need to be independent. And then, of course, question arises, what is independent? And independent, you would say, that is that you do not listen to the views of anyone else on the subject you are dealing with, which is, of course, difficult again, because maybe you will, in any case, I would sometimes, if I have a difficult issue, discuss it with my wife, and she would have a view, and not necessarily or mostly she would not agree with me if I have a view, and she thinks about it differently. And she's a judge, by the way. It is difficult to be independent because everyone is always under pressure from its surroundings, under pressure from your parents, from the country, the political situation, how you behave as an individual. There are so many things that influence you. On the other hand, if you are a judge, independency is, of course, essential. Essential with respect to the question, should I do what someone else tells me to do? And a good judge should never do what someone else tells him to do. He should think himself or herself, what is the best solution or decision on any case, and not what someone else thinks is the best decision. Are those criteria of integrity clear? No, they are not clear. Because, as I said, I would look differently at independency or integrity than possibly other persons. I'm also not a Ukrainian, I'm a Dutchman, which is, of course, also different. And on the other hand, I believe that any decent person, if he looks in his own heart, if there is a decision to be taken, if someone happens, he knows or she knows by him or herself whether or not the decision he or she takes is a decent decision. And if you cannot feel inside whether you're taking the decent decision, then of course you should not be a judge. How are we going to measure that? I don't know. On the other hand, I have measured a lot with respect to integrity issues. And again, I would say I will do my best.
Дякую, пане Брюкхайсен.
Thank you very much, Mr. Broekhuizen, for your comments, and thank you for describing those challenging things and difficulties that might take place, especially when you try to apply different independence, and integrity criteria. Halina, please, welcome to your intervention. Hello, dear colleagues, and welcome everybody who's watching us online. And I'd like to start actually this conversation from extending my words of sincere gratitude to the Selection Commission for their openness and for making sure we have this public dialogue on integrity matters. I believe today this is a very important issue, and our today's conversation will probably inspire many candidates who are still thinking whether to apply or not. Maybe they will be much more encouraged to put their documentation together and apply. Those candidates who are not following integrity, they will also realize that it's not even worth spending their time and the time of the Selection Commission members for these procedures. We're looking for answers regarding who of the judges follow integrity or not since 2016, when the Public Integrity Council had been launched. And I think we are going to be governed not by the criteria that we're now trying to think about and invent, but we're going to be governed by the criteria that judges have put together from the whole world. They met in Bangalore 20 years ago, if you remember, and they discussed the 6 very easy values that have to be followed by all judges without exemption. So I think we're going to be following all those values. And last but not least, there is something I would like to mention. There are so many different definitions for integrity. I think no one can suggest the best one or the universal definition of what integrity is. Like Robert just mentioned, maybe the definition might differ between different judges in Ukraine and judges in the Netherlands, given their local contexts. But I really love the definition that we once heard from one of the conferences that took place in The Hague a couple of years ago. It was organized by the International Chamber of Commerce. There was a conference on integrity specifically. And actually, it was there when integrity was defined as follows. To follow the integrity is to administer everything in the most appropriate and honest way if no one even is watching this. If there is no one watching, you still follow integrity. I think this is the best definition, and I'm sure our dialogue will be very interesting. Mikhailo, please. Thank you very much, Alina. Thank you indeed. We were lucky enough, and first of all, thank you very much to all the commission members and the organizers for having put together this event today. Thank you for responding positively to our request. And Helena, indeed, you grabbed a piece of very important message of mine. I really love this definition myself because indeed it sounds very comprehensive to me. Just recently, we've had a lot of messages about corruption. We've had a lot of reports of indecent behavior or inappropriate deeds. And especially if we're talking about judges who are not just public servants. Judges are one of the highest officials, and they should be role models for the others in terms of integrity. And sometimes it seems really that corruption or any kind of indecent or inappropriate behavior, we've had more cases like this, but no, it's not the case. We don't have more corruption. We have more information about corruption. And this is good. It means that we see the recovering society. We see the society that realizes its challenges. And what Helena just mentioned, and I think this is a very important principle to follow integrity, and it's important to do that even though nobody's watching you sometimes. But somebody will watch you, of course, and they will discover some information about you, about your asset declarations. I think the person of integrity will never be under risk or under the threat from any kind of watching like this, because this information will be in favor and not for the worst side of the individual. Here's something else I'd like to tell you about is that I'm sure, and I agree with Mr. Brookhuizen, that it's not that easy to seek integrity, especially to seek definitions of integrity. It's much easier to say what is not integrity whenever you see any kind of things that are inappropriate and you understand that this is not something others have to follow. I think the same principles apply in the Ukraine or in the Netherlands. Of course, there can be differences depending on time, culture, and local matters and context. But I think we have much more in common than differences in many legal frameworks. That is why Ukraine has chosen this path towards more integrity, towards more efficiency, and this is what we are pushing forward. We want to engage independent international experts to the selection process, to the HQCJ, to High Council of Justice. We are so happy about this, actually, and we expect some very good results. And I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting discussion today. Thank you very much, Mihailo. Thanks very much, dear colleagues. It seems to me we have a very good intro already to our dialogue on integrity. And we have considered integrity from different sides already, from the standpoint of our legislation, from the standpoint of our own understanding and international standards. As well, really, we reflected some of the issues regarding challenges to integrity. Let me move to the second part of today's dialogue, and I'm going to ask Mr. Mihailo and Ms. Helena to define your questions. Let us first start with the first questions that have to do with the expected picture or the portrait of the candidate, of the best candidate, let's say. So please, if you want to voice your questions, we're going to give you the floor. Well, actually, if you allow me, our ambition was to get to know more from the commissioners regarding how they see the portrait of the ideal candidate and the ideal commissioner. Because we've already talked about integrity in the first instance. I'm not going to be spending more time for this. But what's important and interesting is that the commission is not only vetting those candidates, like it had happened in the anti-corruption court competition. There were some reasonable doubts, of course, and everything, and the commission had ruled regarding this, and there was the Council of International Experts, but we have a more challenging task right now. We need to select the real champions, the real role models. So my first question goes to the commissioners. What are the parameters? What is the picture of an ideal candidate that you can draw right now? And who is the best candidate who will best fit for you to then make sure you recommend them to HQCJ, please? Well, if you allow me, I'm going to start right now. Hopefully, Robert will support me. If whenever I say something wrong, Robert, please let me know. And correct me.
Питання в тому, що, власне,
The thing is, the physical portrait of this candidate is already prescribed by the legislation. Minimum 15 years of experience, neutrality, independence, and have good language command, and also professional capabilities, of course. Given the 15 years of experience required, I think this is a well-balanced requirement because this is going to make our job easier. If we had an opportunity to accept people with 3 or 5 years of legal experience or experience in the law, then to assess this person from the standpoint of integrity would have been much more difficult. Because any individual who has already 15 years of experience in the law, it means that these years started from their graduation, and at least this person is 40 years old. This is the minimum. And plus, there are a lot of social links this individual has. There are many people this individual knows, certain assets that have been acquired already by this time. And already right now, it's much easier whether the person has been doing well, I mean, in terms of transparency and integrity over the last 15 years. Has this individual diligently presented or represented the legal profession? It's very good that you mentioned the Bangalore principles. Those were the key principles that have been incorporated in the legal ethics in Ukraine as well. And of course, they're going to be very decisive in terms of assessing the integrity criteria. There is a question whether a person follows all the ethical rules and whether the person can be evaluated in terms of the internal statutes. There are statutes, there is the code of conduct, there are internal requirements as well. This will make, like I said, our job a little bit easier because there are certain official and regulatorily defined criteria. Next one. In any case, this individual has to follow integrity not only from the outside, but from the inside. It was rightly mentioned, actually, that a good example to demonstrate integrity is when you keep yourself under control from your inside, and you have the questioning attitude, you are self-critical. If person does not apply any self-criticism, then I'm not sure this person has to be recommended, and never should this person fill such an important position like an HQCJ member, because those will be 16 HQCJ members who will be vetting judges for years and years ahead, because the judges are appointed for their lifetime. HQs, of course, the selection commission members will be changed, and then the HQCJ members will be changed over time. But at least for now, those judges will have to it for decades. And that's exactly, it will depend on how they follow their integrity and how they verify integrity of the people they will be selecting. These are the things that will be of crucial importance. It would have been much less significant if we were to select 2 or 3 people among the 16. Of course, it would have been much easier. In any case, selecting not very appropriate, not 100% appropriate people in terms of integrity would not be such a challenge, because, you know, if 12 people follow integrity and there are 3 that are not much following that, I think this whole machinery would digest them. For instance, yes, judges have to be respected by their colleagues, first of all. That a judge has to be seen as independent and impartial in the eyes of the colleagues, because we need to check whether people have any challenges to their integrity. We have to verify all the facts, and we have to figure out whether there are any reasonable doubts. It's like love, you know, you either have love or you don't. You cannot prove it anyhow. You just feel it or you don't. That's why many people are asking, what is integrity? Please open up the methodology. Discover this very substantial document. Stephen and Ivan have done a very good job on this. Yes, of course, we introduced some adjustments, but mainly this was their job, their piece. And the key criterion for integrity is to have no reasonable doubt that can be proven. If those, even if those reasonable doubts exist and they are not provable, then you still follow the integrity. Thank you, Johan. Mr. Broekhuizen, is there anything that you would like to add here?
Yes, of course. Yeah, if we select someone, the first thing I believe, it should be someone with authority, because it should be people who have the authority to select people where the people of Ukraine believe and accept that those people are beyond any doubt. And to be a person of authority means that you need to be a good professional, because in any case, lawyers wouldn't believe that someone has authority if such a person has never proven to be a perfect and extremely good professional. So it needs to be a good professional. And the person also needs to be seen as a good professional. So the environment around these individuals may have to believe that this individual is in fact a good professional and is someone who doesn't lie, who doesn't cheat, and is in order. And so I would say it should also be known that the individual we select is someone who is believed to be beyond doubt. The individual, because he is should be a good professional, and because he has to select, he should not be afraid to express his or her opinion. Because of course, I've seen many people who are, let's say, completely sound, but if they are not able or willing to say, and this is difficult because we are selecting people, people they may or may not be connected with. If such an individual is not able or willing or construed to be able to say, I don't want him or her because I don't think she's suitable, then she or he cannot be appointed in this position. And the fact that this individual not only should be a good lawyer, but also be someone who can select good lawyers means that you need to have more, let's say, qualities than only to be a good lawyer. You need to be a good lawyer and someone who is able to select, and someone that the people around us believe that the selection is done properly. And it needs to be someone that the environment, like civil society, but the judges, anyone would say, this is a person I can trust. So I believe that the choices he or she makes are acceptable. And I think that this is all reflected in what we have written down, but then it's legalized, of course. And we should not legalize it, because it's quite clear what we are looking for. We are looking for people who are extremely good professionals, but not only they are good professionals, they should be more. They should be people who can select. And it should not only be people who are honest and who do not have any stains. Not having any stains is not sufficient. People should believe that these are the best people, and they should be the best people. So no stains is not sufficient. And it should be proven behavior. It means that if you have never been successful in what you have done, then don't apply to this job, because you need to have been successful in what you have done. So that would be my views. I can talk about this for hours, I guess, but I won't do that.
Якщо можна, Святославе, я додам трішечки. Безумовно,
If I may, please, yeah. Of course, the professional experience. I mean, we're not that much professional. Not all the commissioners are that much professional in the corruption prevention measures. I traveled to the Slovak Republic and I learned about their judiciary and their anti-corruption court. That was a wonderful experience of mine. Actually, the Ted's experience, who had worked in the Public Integrity Council when they were selecting judges for the high anti-corruption court, and Robert's experience, who had worked as the special anti-corruption prosecutor. This is so valuable. You cannot even imagine how it is valuable. These are the best practices that are put together right now. And we have borrowed a lot of career experience from our commissioners. Robert has developed the motivational letter. This is the main bridge, like I call it, the bridge between the candidate and the selection commission, which has and must convince the commissioners regarding the individual's integrity. And it is aimed to demonstrate not the external perception of the individual as being integrity person, but internal one. This is actually self-control, self-criticism, and self-assessment. This is the presentation of how the individual sees his or her standing in HQCJ potentially. And there are a lot of items on the motivational letter that are important. Please follow the form, follow the limit of 250 words for each and every block. And you'll see that some of the questions sound very much similar, but they are not the same. The most important thing that we need to also receive recommendations from people who see yourself as a person with immaculate reputation. It's not just an issue about the individual who recommends you to have immaculate reputation, but we need to realize that there are people who will recommend you and they cannot see any reputable risks in yourselves. For us, this is a principal thing. We had questions about whether it is mandatory to submit all those recommendations. The law and Article 95 specifically does not explicitly say about this, but we believe the motivational letter is one of the key things that will be able to demonstrate your internal integrity and your attitude to these matters. That's why this issue is extremely important. There are no right or wrong answers. All the questions just are put there to make sure the person can consistently and logically answer to the question. So please pay attention to that. And I would like the lawyers who will be taking care of their application forms to be submitted to the HQCJ membership to pay close attention to motivational letters and recommendations. If I forgot something, let me know. I'm going to tell you more about this. Thank you very much, Johan. Thank you very much, Mr. Robert. I just reminded one thing that I heard once, probably from you, Helena, the other day, and it sounds in English like justice not only must be done, but also must be seen. That is the principle that is expressed by the European Court on Human Rights. Justice does not have to be administered only, but it has to be demonstrated that it is administered in a proper way. So people have to be convinced that justice is there. Justice is happening. It is right here, right now, and it works. That's absolutely right. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you very much, Yevhen and Robert. Halina and Mikhailo, then we can move to the next question. Yes, we can. I understand we don't have too much time, but nevertheless, I have to raise one very important question about the recommendations. Why I'm asking about this specifically, because so many times the professional communities kept asking this question. And you know in which context they were asking it about? First of all, they're saying, well, as much as we heard, it's very difficult to find people who would recommend you to make sure it looks transparent and to avoid any kind of abuse or impartiality challenges. Whether it is admissible that the judges recommend you or someone else, maybe a potential judge can promise something to someone. Okay, he or she may say, you please recommend me, and then I'm going to do something good for you after I'm appointed. Maybe some political figures can recommend you. You know, there are a lot of people among the politicians who might recommend someone, but political neutrality is kind of challenging, and this is an important requirement for an HQCJ member. If you can please share your comment about and your attitude. Who ideally should recommend the candidates? I beg your pardon, Yevhen. I only wanted to make one brief remark. I just reminded when during the Supreme Court selection process back in 2017, there in their questionnaires, they mentioned, please mention 5 people who might recommend you. And one of the individuals indicated 5 people from HQCJ. Oh, sorry, not from the HQCJ, but from the European Court on Human Rights. Sorry. But this person indicated the 5 judges from the European Court on Human Rights, but those 5 judges even never heard about this individual. I know this is an absurd example, but those people were not even aware that they were indicated by the candidate as the people that they could could recommend this candidate. I'm sure it's not worth mentioning any individuals who are not even aware who you are, and you should not write the recommendation letters on their behalf either. We just require 3 recommendation letters, but we will check if those letters are just copy paste with just differences in terms of name of the individual who recommends you. It's not going to work that way. So, dear colleagues, we had a question about this, whether one candidate to HQCJ could recommend another HQCJ candidate. Okay, 2 people go to the this selection process, and they both recommend each other. Well, it's not a bad way to do it, actually, and it's not prohibited by law. But it will be noticed, I'm sure, and people have to realize that those individuals can be quite biased. If you are recommended by your immediate manager or a supervisor that you have worked with 7 to 10 years, that's not bad, because probably that person has known you quite well already, and this manager could have seen how much professional you are and how much a person of integrity you have been. However, if that was in an ideal case, it would be really desirable to make sure those are the people from the other spheres. That's why we were suggesting not to have just 1 recommendation, but 3, to enable and to make people willing to get recommendations from different spheres, let's say from the legal community or social or anything. Not necessarily those recommendations have to be submitted by legal professionals. If there is someone else from different professions tries to recommend you and tells that you actually deserve to be the appointed one. Many people had said, yes, we had problems with this to get all the recommendations for a judge, because judge is always limited in terms of the surrounding people, whether lawyers can recommend a judge or not. At large, why not? It's not banned, it's not prohibited by the law. There might be some of the issues regarding whether this was an honest recommendation and whether it was genuine. For instance, if you're recommended by a lawyer who is now taking part in your trial, in your proceeding. But in my view, it would have been an ideal situation if people could recommend you from different spheres. For instance, one recommendation from a scholar from the academic circles, for instance. Maybe another person could be from your own sphere that you work for, and maybe someone else, even a person who is not related to the judiciary. It's not necessarily that all the recommendations have to come from the legal community. That's the way it should work, I believe. The most important thing you see is that sometimes mass media might interpret our words like we do not recommend to include politicians or public servants who could actually draw recommendations regarding candidates. No, it's not the case. For instance, if you are connected with a politician and you have any personal connection with him or her, let's say this is just a friend of yours and he or she has nothing to do with your service, with your job. If you're recommended by a well-known politician, for instance, will of course trigger additional questions, including during the interview. How did you meet, let's say? What kind of relationship do you support? And does this relationship trigger any kind of impact on your professional life? Are you influenced by this individual? And are you going to be influenced once you're appointed? So I think we have to be very cautious about this. Actually, when the selection process took place to the Supreme Court of Ukraine, well, I'm not sure if this could be something that we should talk about, but many people were asking whether I could be among the people who recommend those individuals. Well, honestly, I was very cautious about this regarding who I could recommend and who I could not. In order to recommend an individual to such a high and important position, this is part of your internal and intrinsic responsibility, because you are responsible about how this person will be behaving on the job already. And this could affect either positively or negatively your own work, couldn't it? Thank you very much, Johan, for this very comprehensive answer and your personal example as well. Mr. Broekhuizen, please.
Yeah, I don't think it's so difficult because we try to select people who are good professionals. We try to select people who are also are people of integrity, and we try to select people who have, let's say, human skills and can communicate. So as I look at it, it would not be very wise to start having recommendations from politicians, because one of the ideas of the HQCJ is, of course, that you do not have too many political contacts and relationships, and you are independent. And if I don't say that you cannot choose a politician, of course you can, but as Yevgen says, that may raise questions. I would find it difficult to understand that if you're, for instance, a judge who would be applying, that you would not be able to find another judge who could tell something positive about you. From my perspective, I'm not very much impressed if it's only bosses who give, let's say, letters of reference. Why would it only be the boss? It would not give more value for me if it is the boss, or it would be a colleague, or it would be someone working below you. I would say that most likely you should ask a colleague, because the colleagues, if they are prepared to say something positive about you, it means something. And and to have only formal answers, then it would not have any value whatsoever. I would expect that someone would write a letter, or would be someone who can say something, whether he would say or she would say that you're a person of integrity. And that doesn't need to be, let's say, a lawyer or a judge. It may be the guy from the bakery shop who you helped, or it may be someone from the secondary school where you have an activity. It may be someone from the sports club. I don't mind. And I would expect that that someone would say something about you that you're willing to communicate. So why wouldn't it be your best friend who explains what a fantastic person you are and shed some lights on you? I would find it very difficult if you would be applying for this job and you would not be able to find different people from different background willing to say something positive about you. That I would find is conspicuous. It means, yeah, if you have no friends and you have no one who would say something positive about you, how can you expect that people accept you as the selector of the judiciary in Ukraine?
Я хотів додати, до речі, Роберт
Well, I would
підняв
like to add here, because Robert raised an issue that I wanted to explain at the very end of my intervention.
Sorry.
The question is, if over the 15 years of the person's individual experience, being, for instance, in the law job, you have never seen or had any people who could recommend you as the person of integrity and as a decent one, you can just say, I'm sorry, just putting your hands like this. There's something else you must have done that no people can recommend you. It means that you are a bad communicator. You do not see yourself as a team fighter, as a team player. How can you work in such a participatory body like HQCJ is? And last but not least, please avoid recommendations from individuals that you have a conflict of interest with. I'm going to give you an example. It's going to be looking very surprising if, for instance, an assistant judge will be recommending the judge. I mean, you're the judge right now, and you have your assistant who recommends you. That is an obvious conflict of interest because, for instance, the judge prepares a submission to appoint the assistant. The judge works daily with the same individual, with this assistant. And of course, the judge can apply for the assistant to resign or to dismiss the assistant or fire him. Let's put it in a simple word. We would not encourage recommendations from assistants. All the other ones can do that. No problem with that whatsoever. Thank you. Thank you, Yevhen. Thank you, Robert. Helena, please. Then we can move to the next item on our agenda. Yes, indeed. My next question is, it's probably a little bit provocative, but nonetheless, it is important, I believe. Since we're talking for a certain while regarding who is the good, if not ideal candidate, what is this person what is this person supposed to be? And then the next question, who should not be on the HQCJ membership? What kind of deeds or behavior or decisions from the past could create obstacles for the selection commission members to vote in favor of such a candidate? At least when you were answering your question, Mikhailo's question about who is the person of integrity, we were mentioning independence as well, if you remember, which leads me to the conclusion that informal contacts of the candidates with politicians potentially, because we have seen situations when judges had meetings with representatives of the political government, with members of parliament who had been called the watchdogs or the curators of the judiciary in Ukraine. You've seen a lot of reports about this, that some of the judges had personal contacts with politicians. Well, if that candidate had such facts or had such contacts with high-ranking politicians, will this candidate fit or not? Or for instance, when there are issues with their asset declarations, for instance, a judge makes $20,000 a year and has a car that is worth $200,000, is this a good candidate or not? Could you tell us now who should not apply, who is not fitting enough to the commission requirements? Finally, we ended up with an interesting question. Definitely who's not going to work here. Beyond any reasonable doubt, I'm going to tell you about it. Luckily, the state and the legislation has provided us with certain criteria. First of all, we're not limited by any kind of time or territorial restrictions regarding where to find information about the candidates, and that's great. For example, if 8 years ago, for instance, you held liable according to Article 130, which is drunk driving, despite the all the legal consequences and your liability has expired, we still need to take these facts into account whenever we figure out whether the person follows integrity or not. If we move to some specific situations, whether any kind of fact can be an obstacle on the way to the so much dreamed membership in HQCJ, it is still early to say it in a straightforward manner on behalf of all the commissioners. But at the same time, it's worth underlining here that if we have some of the examples in the questionnaires, like informal meetings, some obvious facts of relationship with politicians and the gaps between the official salary and the assets the person has, similar facts will have to do with the acquisition of property abroad and in the Crimea specifically. Those are the matters that will be triggering additional questions from the commissioners, and naturally they will be triggering questions whether this person indeed follows integrity, whether there are all the criteria met, and whether there are any reasonable doubts about this. Of course, we're going to be deciding on this. Information about the meetings, arrangements, and stuff, it has to, of course, be provided with evidence. The information about decisions made, I mean, if that's a judicial decision, or if a lawyer took part in a very high-profile legal case defending the side of a not very popular politician, let's say. On the one hand, this will be triggering questions about the circumstances. It has to be evaluated from the standpoint of all the facts. Of course, we will gladly receive all the information from the civil society, and your vision and your opinions will be very much appreciated. Of course, we're going to be responsive to the opinion of the candidates about their facts. And to me personally, the questions or issues that have to do with the court decisions made by a specific judge will be always evaluated from the standpoint of our constitution regarding the mandatority of enforcing the decisions. Any decision, if not lifted, if not declined, they have to be enforced. It has to be enforced. So if there are any questions about this professional capacity, of course, it will be subject to our discussions between the commissioners. Naturally, we're all different. Our commissioners are different, and the level of criticism that we can apply to each and every fact, each and every circumstance will be different. We're all legal professionals, and of course, we will be having a very critical attitude, both to the evidence and to the circumstance about the person's background. whether it is he or her. We don't have any gender quotas, like we said last time. And from the standpoint of sustainable development of our democratic society, we would like to see gender balanced or gender situation balanced. And that's why we will be pursuing gender mainstreaming in our future commission's work. That's it. If you have any additional questions, I'm going to gladly answer them.
Дякую, пане Євгене.
Thank you, Yevhen.
Я знову таки передам ще, можливо, слово пану Брюкхайсену.
I will probably give the floor to Mr. Broekhuizen, and he will tell us a bit more about what kind of candidates you would probably find challenging to vote in favor for. So which ones would you not accept?
Well, whether or not I'm going to vote in favor for someone, of course, I will not express here. But in the motivation letter, we have designed, let's say, a question around this. And we are asking to any candidate to explain whether there are specific issues in its background that may raise concerns to the candidate seat to be a member of the commission, and with respect to the compliance to the criteria of integrity and criteria of professional competence. And what we expect, of course, is that people, if there are stains on them, and many people have stains, that's what you get in life. That is not prohibiting you to try to seek this job. However, you need to be able to explain them, and what we expect is that you tell us in advance so that we know about it and we do not find it out ourselves. And I would say that anyone who's considering to apply knows for himself whether there are so many stains that would prohibit someone to pass the own test. If someone is not able or not willing to explain in writing in the motivational letter, well, I have a stain and the stain is X, and I would explain what happened, and now don't worry about it, then it gets really difficult. So the first thing is that whatever you have done in the past, whatever person you are, whatever stain you have, please tell us in advance and explain why this does not prohibit you to apply for the job. And if we find out later ourselves that someone is, let's say, staining you, and you didn't tell us in advance, then I believe it gets very difficult. I believe that our commission is relying on the openness and the honesty of the candidates. If you are not open and honest about your past, how can you ever be selected on basis of the criteria that are in the law? And secondly, someone who has never done anything substantial in his life, never did a case which attracted any attention, never been in a position that he had to stick out his head above, let's say, the grass with the difficulty that it was chopped off, then I don't think you are the good person for this job, because we need, of course, to have some strong people and not people that, if there's some pressure, hide below the table and say, I hope that this storm passes. Because storms, there are always storms, and those storms, they don't pass so easily. So you need to have, let's say, done enough in life that the people around you find and expect from you that you do this job decently, and that they trust that you will do it decently. It's the same story, but done in a negative form. So I would invite everyone to apply, but you can be sure that we will be critical. I've been interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people in my life, and asking critical questions, I think, is the only reason I was selected to be in this situation. And of course, we will be asking difficult questions. Whoever will be applying, if he's the biggest judge ever in Ukraine or not, it would not make a difference in the questioning.
І, в принципі, на підтримку цієї
And actually,
позиції
in supporting your message, Robert, I would like to add something.
на правах капітана очевидності.
You know,
Варто подаватися людям,
That's quite obvious. I don't think people have to apply who have any kind of limitations that are prescribed by law. Robert absolutely rightly mentioned, whenever we have any doubts about the person's integrity, but we will be still taking a differentiated approach. Obviously, it's not worth applying if you, for instance, have passports of foreign countries. That's obvious. This is a no-go situation. And that's why in our previous meeting, Mikhailo, if you remember, you were asking about whether candidates can apply if they have proven facts that will create huge obstacles to their candidacy. And if they can supply information later than 5 days before the interview. Yes, they can, but that information must be so important that can actually affect the person's movement to the next phase. That's an absolutely critical criterion. One of the most painful issue politically and historically is the issue of the Crimea. Yes, there are cases, and there can be cases when the person crosses the Crimean border and acquires real estate in the Crimea. At the same time, this individual has a tax ID of the Russian Federation, let's say. So if you have the tax ID, then you have the fiscal ID, and then you are deemed to be the Russian taxpayer. If you are identified as a foreign taxpayer and you fail to submit that in the declaration, which is a must, because all those IDs have to be indicated in the declaration, that's not appropriate. That's even beyond reasonable doubt. It's just a breach of the legislation. This is the perfect violation. Any kind of doubt like this may lead to the chain reaction. And if the law is violated, it's going to be a major obstacle for the candidate to move on. On the other hand, if the person had crossed the border on the Crimea, I had a personal example. One of the colleagues of mine had to travel to the occupied territory, to the Crimea, to take away her mother from the hospital who had the bisided pneumonia on both lungs. And God bless, she rescued her mother. She brought her back to Kiev, where she received decent treatment, and thank God that mother survived, and she's still alive right now. Of course, that candidate desperately needed to travel to the Crimea to rescue her mom, and that's understandable, isn't it? But our assessment will be done in the positive selection mode. We do not want to make any negative conclusions that would shed negative attitude on the candidate's future employment opportunities and career path. That is a responsible part of our job. Of course, this is a challenging process as well to process 500 applications versus processing 1,500 applications means a lot of effort, and it's going to be time consuming. At the same time, we want to make sure we select as many people as possible, and we vet and analyze as many as we can. If people do not comply, we're not going to say, you did not comply because you were bad there and there. No, we're going to say, I'm sorry, but this time your application will not go further, and I'm sorry, but this time you're not invited to the interviews. This is going to give us more options to actually select at least the best from the best, if not ideal individuals. Of course, there are no ideal people in the world, but we would like to encourage people to join us if they are close enough to be ideal ones. I'd like to wish you every success, inspiration, and do not forget to fill out all the forms and annexes. Because some of these individuals who have already submitted their applications, some of them have forgotten to attach a certain document or an annex to the application. Please, once again, double check all the documents that are required. This is super important. Thank you very much, Johan. Mihailo, I've seen another question from you. I can see that we've had technical difficulties. Mihailo, we agreed with the colleagues of ours that we can go till 5:30 Kyiv time, which is 4:30 Robert's time. So let us keep a little bit of time, a little bit more time. Thank you very much for this. And I think we have organically moved to another issue. Several times you have mentioned beyond reasonable doubt, and several times you mentioned the reasonable doubts there available. Johan had mentioned that there was not a tragedy if an individual, for instance, failed the competition, and it's not going to have any negative impact. It's not about winners and losers. It's just about selecting the best ones, which is the nature of positive selection, isn't it? So at least we expect to have that. Of course, we have more people per job, and that's why the competition is there. If we just had one individual per one job, why would anyone want the competition? And therefore, I would like to ask one question from you. Yes, we have a frequently asked question and a frequently found answer for it. That was actually once happened with the Public Integrity Council, and during the qualification testing, during the competition to the Supreme Court and to the Anti-Corruption Court as well. There was one very popular question there. What's the standard and the criterion of proof? Because of course, there is a beyond reasonable doubt. This principle applies to criminal proceedings where the legal consequences are very different. It's like incarceration or any kind of other conviction. In this competition, people are not going to get incarcerated for whatever they supply and whatever they submit, right? Maybe the standards of proof are not that strict here, but we've heard a lot about this in many procedures, like try to prove and provide us with facts about a challenging issue that you have faced. But what are the facts that would suffice, and what are the arguments that will be sufficient for the Commission to make a decision? On the other side of the extremes is like, one old granny had said once that you were corrupt, but we don't know her name and we don't know what she was talking about. So can you tell a bit about the standards and of proof? Because I believe it's important to understand what should be proven and how should it be proven. Thank you very much for this question. In fact, we are now approaching our organic understanding why we're here. We are here for the dialogue with you today. We do not just have to give you understanding about what you are supposed to do and what we are supposed to do. We need to be getting information from you, how you will be presenting the cases about candidates to ourselves, and how we will be receiving this information in a prompt manner from you. If we take, for instance, a definition of reasonable doubt or objective doubts, this is a justified degree of doubts based on the appropriate and reliable information and facts that we've received, or any kind of complaints or convictions. To a certain extent, you're right. There is a clash between the reasonable doubt, which is used as a standard of proof in general law and Ukrainian legislation. However, this approach is a bit different in our case, because criminal law defines the degree of or the gravity of guilt of the defendant, and none of the jurors have to have reasonable doubts about the individual's criminal legacy. But in our case, it is different. We want to see no suspicion of integrity in those candidates. We want to see this candidate's valuable behavior and conduct in the society. So, of course, we need to have a diverse approach. If there is a publication somewhere, or there is a leaflet that we received anonymously from someone, or if there is something written on the fence next to our building, you know, I'm not gonna be developing all this communication, but each and every year, our journalists publish 3 or 4 nominations regarding themselves, regarding the journalist ethics. This is something that I would like to, I don't want to advertise any of those media, but there is like a top 5 winners of the best journalists or best media. Regarding your proofs, you are not limited here whatsoever. Even, I'll tell you even more about this. The selection commission and Sviat will prove it, that we're going to be trying to collaborate with the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, with the National Agency on the Prevention of Corruption, to understand, to receive information from them as well regarding the financial proceeds and the financial transparency of those candidates. We're still discussing the modus operandi. We're still discussing the way we will be collaborating with them. So, but anyways, I'd like to tell you that we are not only receiving information from NABU that we already agreed upon to collaborate, we already signed the MOU with them, the Memorandum of Understanding. This was the very first document that our commission has concluded with the external, so to say, actors. So your possibilities and your information have to be reliable and proven by documents that will be possibly used as evidence in our case. To tell you a bit more about our selection commission, we indeed act as a quasi-judicial body, because we make our own assessment of the individual's previous behavior and conduct and integrity, and because the standard of proof beyond the reasonable doubt or objective doubt is very high, it requires to be objectively confirmed to actually eliminate and lift any reasonable doubts. But the available reasonable doubt is already sufficient for the commission to believe that there is 1 or 2 criteria which are not met. According to our methodology, we have 8 criteria for integrity and 7 for professional competence. And believe me, there are more than enough reasons to vet out some of the candidates. And that creates the basis for us to actually vet out some of the candidates, like I said. But anyways, we were selected by the judiciary. We were selected by our international donors. And I believe if we do not trust the selection commission, then who else can be trusted in this world? Maybe I was a little bit elaborate in my explanation, but anyways, we need to have verified and provable information, because the information from unproven sources, yes, it will be taken into consideration, but none of these documents will have the legal force, though. If there is a legal conclusion from the corruption prevention agency, or there is any kind of information that comes from the HQCJ regarding the candidate's compliance or non-compliance with some of the integrity or professional competence criteria, for the selection commission, such a conclusion will be valuable, but presently it's not going to have an established legal power. It's not that we're going to say, if you have a bad conclusion from the corruption prevention agency, that's it, you're stopped. No, it's not going to be the case. Thank you very much, Johan. Thank you very much, Mikhailo. Robert, please, I would encourage you to share your comment about a reasonable doubt. But please, let's take just 3 minutes because we're approaching the end of our conference.
3 minutes must be enough. Well, the candidates, of course, they need to be in conformity with the criteria of integrity, and it should also be good professionals. And even when we are looking at those candidates, if there are reasonable doubts, then they will not be selected. That's the idea. And of course, what is reasonable doubt is, again, a difficult kind of thing, because for instance, in the Netherlands, reasonable doubt or doubt principle is not used at all in criminal law, and we have a complete different kind of law. So what we do is we use some kind of Anglo-Saxon principle in the selection in a Roman French system, like we do here as well. I believe that this reasonable doubt thing is mainly something for the discussion between the commissioners to decide whether or not someone can pass. Because what we try to do is, of course, we try to select the best. And selecting the best, positive selection, as we call that, means that we try to select from all the candidates the best candidates who should go forward. And even when there's someone in this selection where we have doubts, and of course those doubts should be reasonable, about the individual's integrity, and there are a number of commissioners who believe that there should be or may be doubts, then I would expect that this person will not be selected. And in that respect, it is all not so complicated. We can make it very complicated, but it is not complicated. If there are doubts and stains, the candidate has to explain in advance what are the doubts and stains. We will have an open discussion about those doubts and stains, and we may ask questions about them before we have the interview. If someone is selected, then again, there will be questions about someone's integrity. And if then doubts or stains appear, then there will be reasonable doubts and the person will not be selected. So I don't think it's very complex, and anyone would understand the principle. Just within 3 minutes, Sviat?
Так. Дякую, пане
Ти
Брукхайсен.
дозволиш мені два
Thank you very
слова?
much, Mr. Brookhuizen. Let me add a couple of words, if I may, please. Look, the question is,
Зверніть увагу, ми структурували...
let us see, we have structured this selection procedure. And in this procedure, we need to appoint not to appoint, but sorry, from 64 people, we need to select 32 people first for the interviews, and then recommend 32 and 16 will be appointed. But these figures like 16, 32, and 64 is just a result of a lot of maths in our commission. We were discussing for hours how many people we need to admit to the interviews, whether to admit all of them or select a certain number. I think this approach is governed primarily by the following principle. If we have 64 candidates that will be invited for interviews, those are already supposed to be people which should be not even questionable, or even if there are questions, they have to be very small. Just this is the matter of asking an additional question, and this should be something of minor significance, not great significance. If you already made it to the interview, this is already part of your victory. Of course, then we're going to be selecting the best from the best. And I'm sure it's going to be a very difficult process to select 32 from 64. Hopefully, until that time, almost ideal people will make it. Highly professional ones with no questions about their integrity and assets, with a very high degree of self-control and self-criticism. It is indeed very important to realize that an individual who has to select judges in the future, who will have to also select best from the best into the judiciary, this person needs to have questioning attitude, self-criticism, take critical attitudes towards the other candidates. Only the best judge is the one who can make a negative judgment about him or herself. You know, like Agatha Christie once wrote in her novel. Thank you very much, Mr. Brookhuizen, Mr. Mezentsev. We're only having 10 minutes remaining, so before giving you the floor for the closing remarks. I'd like to ask some of the technical questions. Nevertheless, they are very important for the potential candidates at this point of time. These are questions like that require yes or no answers. Is it mandatory to submit all the copies of documents in PDF format to the email that was announced? All the documents have to be converted electronically into the PDF format. All the electronic copies of the submitted documents are supposed to be in PDF. Of course, you can, for instance, submit your hard copies on the 3rd of March, and then on the 4th, you can also submit electronic documents. But in any case, electronic documents are not supposed to be received later than on the 4th of March by 11:59 at night. And there's one principal difference, and that's a principal exception, that the motivational letter has to be available in PDF format and also in the editable format, Open Document or Microsoft Word. So please pay attention to this once again and make sure you submit your motivational letter both in PDF and Microsoft Word. All the other documents have to be available in PDF. No need to sign it digitally. Johan, is it right to say that the candidates who have already submitted their hard copies to HCJ, can they now additionally submit the electronic copies of those to the email that was announced already? Yes, no problem with that whatsoever. All the way until the 4th of March, they have all the opportunities to do that. Thank you very much, Johan. And there is one more question here regarding the declarations, if I'm not mistaken. It has to be filled out on the NACP website. I mean, the National Agency of the Corruption Prevention. It must be submitted, and it is deemed to be submitted after it is filled completely, verified whether there are any mistakes, including typos, and it should be verified by the digital signature. And if you receive on your mailbox that is linked to your electronic signature that the declaration is officially submitted, this letter is only received once it is accepted by the declaration agency. So it is available. Of course, we're not going to be disclosing any confidential data, and it's not going to be available. There are certain restrictions over there. The Commission will see only the declaration the way it is demonstrated on the website, like all the other agencies or any other outside observers can see coming to the website. That's it. The remaining documents, the e-declaration, will be stored in the National Agency on the Prevention of Corruption. It is available in the registry, and that's no problem about that whatsoever. Thank you very much, Johan. And there is one more thing here regarding psychiatric and drug abuse records. Do they have to submit those proofs that they're not on the lists? And electronically or hard copies? There was a question about those medical certificates and references. The law clearly says, I can even quote this. I don't think it is worth wasting time for it, but the way it sounds is that those are supposed to be proofs that the person is not on the psychiatric or drug abuse list. So this is the status that has to be proven, whether you are positively on the list or you're negatively, so you're not on the list. If you have a certificate that you have been registered at the drug abuse or psychiatric registries, with all my due respect, this can be a major obstacle for your participation in the selection. Of course, the applicants have to supply those forms. They can be different. They can be different, but there is a certain standard. These are the same certificates that you submit whenever you want to get your driver's license or a license for firearms, anything else. So you just need to submit it. You can even demonstrate the original copy whenever you want whenever you are at the interview. I think I've given a comprehensive answer because this is a frequently asked question. There is another one as well. If there is any official decision made, which number, please refer to decision number 9 as of the 21st of January, when our first official meeting took place. Thank you very much, Johan, for the very comprehensive answers to some of the technical questions that were frequently asked. Our discussion has been very interesting and lively, and we have answered to some of the important questions regarding the methodology and integrity matters. We also talked about assessment of integrity, how it is previewed and perceived by the commissioners. Indeed, the candidates need to know answers to these questions, so thank you very much for those answers. Dear colleagues, we have come to closing of our today's event. So let me briefly give the floor 1 minute each to each and every participant of the today's meeting. Please, if you have any wrap-up remarks, let us start with you, Johan, and then let's keep going forward in the same order like we started. Thanks very much for today's opportunity. I'm sure it is a great chance to express our minds. Hopefully you have received as much pleasure as I have myself. So hopefully our guests have seen today the positive setup of the commissioners in the view of our future work. Unfortunately, you need to realize, dear colleagues, that for us to follow the principles of independence and openness and transparency, we cannot disclose all the methodologies that will be applied for the evaluation of all the potential candidates. And I don't think it would be right to completely disclose all the approaches that will be applicable in our future work, because we don't want to share that information in advance. But believe me or not, we're going to be doing everything possible that the selection is as much transparent, as much genuine, and as much open as possible. Hopefully, it will produce very positive impacts for the years to come that we all expect here. Thank you. Thank you, Johan. Robert, please.
Well, I would call upon everyone who's listening to this and who has 15 years of experience and the suitable background to apply, because this is really important jobs that need to be done, which is important for the future of Ukraine, because Ukraine needs new judges, and Ukraine needs judges who are seen to be not corrupt and good judges. And the selection needs to start as soon as it can. And in order to select those judges, we need to have the best selectors, and that's what the Commission will try to do. And the more candidates we have, the better selection we can make. So send this to us as soon as you can. Thank you.
Дякую, пане Роберте. Прошу, пані Галино.
Thanks, Robert. Helena, please. I thank you ever so much, Shuyat. The first thing that I'd like to express is to thank our commissioners for the very honest answers to our questions. And I'd like to make one emphasis on one of the things that Johan mentioned just now. Indeed, right now we are talking about selecting the people who will be deciding on the future of the Ukraine's judiciary for the decades to come, because those judges that are selected right now by the commissioners will be appointed for the lifetime, not just for 1 year or 2 years or 5 years. Yes, of course, these judges will be appointed forever. And given the current condition and the status of our today's judiciary, given those extraordinary circumstances that we're all facing, and engagement of international experts to the selection commission will hopefully produce as a result a very good outcome. You will be able to select the best of the best and the most diligent and decent individuals who will show the best moral and professional standards. Hopefully, integrity will be the key and the most important component, and also the face of our judiciary. I wish you every success, dear commissioners, in pursuit for looking for and selecting the best HQCJ members. Thank you. Thank you very much, Helena. Hello. I want to thank you very much. I'm joining all the words of and the best wishes to you. Without trying to be very high profile and speaking in a very high profile manner, yes, indeed, we need maybe 2,500 plus judges in Ukraine. That is important. That's why it's HQCJ who will be shaping the face of the judiciary and in many aspects, the face of the entire Ukraine as a state of integrity, as a state of strong judiciary. And we will be much more competitive if that works successfully. So I'd like to really express my words of sincerest gratitude to the commissioners for your openness, for your transparency, and for your genuine answers to our questions in this dialogue. Because it is through this dialogue, through these practices established by the Commission, we can already crave this portrait of the best professional. We are discussing integrity and we share the same understanding. And it's important that I underline the word we. You see, I'm saying we, not you and ourselves, but we all together. I think there are values that we share together. And over months, I'm sure we will be having more opportunities for such events to discuss these matters with you, to discuss what worked and what hasn't, to best select the best of the best judges. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thanks very much, Mikhailo. Thanks a lot to our commissioners as well. Let us thank Helena and Mr. Mikhailo. Thank you very much, our civil society organization members. Hopefully, like Mikhailo said, it's going to be another step and another contribution and input to the success of the selection process. We're all trying hard to make sure everything works in the best possible way. We want this selection to be successful and it will produce major success.